All right, today marks the very first time here in Kenya, East Africa's biggest economy, that the daily percentage test positive rate, that is the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases out of the total tests done, has crossed 5%, with a record high of 5.2% test positive and a record high of 147 cases out of 2,831 tests. Is this trend upwards this week a reason to worry for Kenyans? This is a question that we'll be trying to dissect in the course of this program. Even without a lockdown or a high-tech healthcare system, Ethiopia, on the other hand, is actually seemingly managing to beat the coronavirus pandemic by leveraging its community healthcare system. And of course, the country, which has a population of 110 million, has only 731 cases. As we let that sink in, let's now take a look at the top stories tonight. Kenya records 147 new COVID-19 cases within 24 hours as fears of community infection spike in city slum areas. Central Bank Governor Patrick Njoroge reveals that 3/4 of SMEs in Kenya do not have enough credit to last them for 2 more months. Kilifi MP Aisha Jumwa and Chris Wamalwa ousted from NASA leadership roles in the National Assembly. Welcome to this broadcast. My name, as always, is Eugene Nangwe, and our sign language interpreter is Anwai Rimo. Remember, you can always be part of the program. All you need to do is comment on our Twitter feed, and the hashtag to use, as always, is Africa411. You can tweet at TV47KE, or feel free to tweet me directly at Eugene Nangwe, and we'll be able to sample your thoughts in the course of this particular program. Now, a record 147 new cases of COVID-19 infections have been recorded here in Kenya, and this has happened in the last 24 hours. This brings the national tally for confirmed COVID-19 cases, infections, to 1,618. Take a look.
147 is the highest number of new COVID-19 cases infections to be reported in Kenya within 24 hours since the first case was reported in March 13th.
Today, 147 people have tested positive out of 2,831 samples now tested. This means that Kenya now has 1,618 people who have now tested positive.
Out of the reported cases, Nairobi has 90, Kiambu has 3, Nyeri and Uasin Gishu has 2 cases each. On Thursday, 3 people succumbed to the virus, while 13 others were discharged from hospital, increasing the number of recoveries to 421.
Kebra, 35 persons. Langata, 15, and that's near Kibera as well. Makadara has 9, Westlands has 8, Embakasi Central has 6, Embakasi West has 5, Kamukunji has 2, Mathare an additional 1. You recall that yesterday we had 33.
Health CS Mutahi Kagwe announced the new numbers in Kiambu County, where he had gone to assess the county's COVID-19 health response measures. Out of the leading counties with COVID-19 cases, Kiambu is ranked 4th with 39 cases.
This number accounts for more than 60% of the counties affected. Kiambu County has recorded 39 cases, placing it at number 4, behind Nairobi at 835, Mombasa at 490, and Kajiado at 65.
Even as the county government of Kiambu is trying hard to combat the spread of COVID-19, Governor James Nyoro has called upon the national government to assist them by allocating more funds in order to complete different projects.
That you continue to support us in addition to obviously getting more testing kits, we would also request that you help us to finalize that facility there. Because we wanted to be dedicated fully to COVID, we realized there is need to have a fully operational ICU of 14 beds.
Globally, at least 5.6 million cases have been reported, with more than 300,000 fatalities. Over 2.3 million people have recovered from the disease. Zablon Macharia, TV47, Nairobi.
Right, still remaining here in Kenya, now informal settlements in Nairobi like Kibra and Mathare are reportedly at a higher risk of increased numbers of COVID-19 infections due to the large number of people who live in those particular places. And of course, this particularly puts a situation to a very tough moment, especially for those who are living and working towards enforcing curfew and restricting, large gatherings in these particular areas. Let's take a look at this particular story that's points to a picture of the status at informal settlement areas and dealing with COVID-19.
The increasing number of COVID-19 positive cases in major informal settlements in Nairobi continues to cause fear and panic, considering the concentration of people living in close proximity and poor hygiene in those settlements. As of Wednesday, Mathare reported 33 new positive coronavirus cases, with the number increasing by 3 more cases on Thursday. Kibra took the bulk of new cases reported on Thursday.
The distribution in Nairobi is as follows. Kibra, 35 persons. Langata, 15, and that's near Kibera as well. Makadara has 9, Westlands has 8, Embakasi Central has 6, Embakasi West has 5, Kamukonji has 2, Mathare an additional 1. You recall that yesterday we had 33.
This high number of cases put people in these informal settlements and others at high risk, as people rarely observe health measures meant to curb the spread of the highly contagious virus. And even though a number of residents in Kibra and Mathare slums have taken action to reduce the spread of coronavirus by mobilizing the people on containment measures, the steps are far from bearing fruits.
Si kazi yetu most yenye tunafanya ni kutrainisha wasee venye wanaweza nawa na venye wanaweza keep safe. Pia venye wanaweza dunga mask, hiyo design ndio tunajaribu kuwaelimisha. So hapa ndio wasee wananawa, process yote ni hapa.
Cumulatively, Mathare and Kibra have recorded over 70 new COVID-19 positive cases in 48 hours. Eli Logova, TV47, Nairobi.
Well, Prof. Omu Anzala is the chief virologist at the Kave Institute of Clinical Research at the University of Nairobi, and he now joins us to give us perspective of these particular numbers. Prof, thank you so much for making time and talking to us tonight. It's very interesting times, especially for Kenya right now. Looking at this week, today marked the first time in Kenya where the number of those people who are tested turned out to be positive, the number hitting 147. Talk to us a bit about how significant these numbers are, because we have people who are now confused, and there are those who you meet in these corridors telling you that, we are finished. These numbers are now pouring in like nobody's business. Are we winning this battle through the signs of these numbers? Should we worry, Prof?
Thank you, Anangwe, for having me on TV 47. Mm-hmm. And also let me say hello to the viewers. Mm-hmm. Really, there is no cause for alarm. Mm-hmm. I think ever since there was an outbreak, and ever since this pandemic was declared, yes, we have worked personally. I've worked with the Ministry of Health very, very closely in the National COVID Task Force, mm-hmm. and we have been really observing and preparing and responding accordingly as we move along. Mm-hmm. The numbers we are seeing are actually some of the things that we are expecting, because we are now testing more. So what my advice would be, let us as citizens just adhere to those measures that we have actually declared.
Yes.
Issues of physical or social distancing, issues of wearing masks. What we are now seeing is people are not wearing masks, they are using it as a chin support. That is not what it is intended to do.
Right.
Wear a mask the way it's meant to be. It must cover your entire mouth and the entire nose.
Right.
And you have to have it any time you are in a public place.
Yeah, but you see, you say, and you've actually correctly witnessed this, because we see it a lot of times where most people are not able to fully follow the health guidelines given to us by the Ministry of Health, particularly with the example you've given of wearing the mask correctly. And here we are, talking about planning to open schools, and we're talking about children who are often very playful, and sometimes they even forget part of their school uniform at school. Maybe they've left a book at school.
That's true.
Are we taking a risk, a huge risk, talking even about reopening schools at this particular time, Prof?
No. You see, Anangwe, schools are not opening tomorrow. What we are doing at the Ministry of Health and what is also going on at the Ministry of Education is that discussion has started. And you see the way things are done in a situation of this nature is that you want to bring all the stakeholders on the table. Look at the pros, look at the cons of it, ask yourself what is going on, what are the risks, what are the advantages. So this discussion has just started. And before really schools are reopened, it will be informed with a lot of stakeholders, informed with a lot of information, but more so also informed with the science that is actually going on.
Right.
Because when we look at the entire structure, there are different levels of risk. Certain industries are more at risk than others because of crowding and what have you. So my appeal to Kenyans is that let's be part of the process. So when we say distance, you distance. Wear a mask properly, wear a mask. Involve yourself in this discussion, please do. Be your brothers or your sister's keeper. When you see somebody trying to not do what is right, please let them know that that is not right, because we are in this all together. Realize that this is a very contagious infection.
Right.
It has been with us maybe a maximum of only 6 months. So there are a lot of things that are still unknown. And these things are just beginning to be known slowly as the epidemic evolves itself.
Right.
So I'm not worried about schools opening. Eventually, schools will open. Eventually, universities will open. Eventually, we will have to go to work. But it has to be very structured, very well informed, so that we don't end up overwhelming the healthcare system.
Right. And you mentioned the fact that, still a lot is unknown about this particular virus. We are aware that the projections, as far as the modeling is concerned, had projected about 10,000 infections by April.
Yes.
And today we are past April, going to June, and we are still dancing around 1,000, almost dropping into 2,000. Do you feel that when the society sees this modeling projections versus what is on the ground, when they say things on the ground are different, does it undermine the efforts of actually looking at the seriousness of COVID-19? Does it make us feel like, hii kitu bwana, you know?
It's not that bad.
Yes, yes.
No. COVID is an infectious disease. COVID is bad. You don't want to end up on the wrong side, and you don't want to end up being a casualty. When we did modeling, is that we modeled on 2 scenarios. Worst case scenario, where we did nothing. In a scenario where we put certain restrictions in place. And what was also very good is that we identified the first case in Kenya, I think, on the 12th or the 13th. It was either a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And by that weekend, already directives had been put in place. The following week, the schools were closed, universities were closed, restriction in movement was done, curfew was done. So all these things were done in very, very quick succession. And all these measures have actually helped to kind of lower the numbers that we would have seen.
Yes, but Prof, some people say that probably we could not be having any numbers at all if the government had moved swiftly to even, restrict movement at our borders and our airports, which actually took some time before that action was taken. We saw a lot of dilly-dallying of sorts between a decision to stop entry of planes coming from China specifically or not. I mean, if we had shut the airports down, would we be looking at these models that we are seeing, that you're talking about right now?
True, certain decisions are, it's true, maybe stopping travel in country from China, from Europe, and from North America maybe took a bit of time. But also it was also because informed by the various other processes internationally. Mm-hmm. So yes, there were delays, but also at the same time, we must also give credit to the government that even though there were delays, certain things in the country were put together very, very fast. Yeah. And that has actually limited the numbers that we had actually predicted in terms of the worst case scenario. Right. So to some extent, I can confidently say that the measures have been put in place, have been working. The only issue now we see, for those of us who are in Nairobi, you can see that people are beginning to go back to their old self. Mm. If we go back to normal, we are going to have a lot of issues. So let us just adhere to this new normal up to a certain extent where we shall be able to scientifically say, yes, we are out of the woods, that we can lift all the restrictions. Right. We are not out of the woods yet.
We are not out of the woods yet. Prof, I want to leave you, yes, but I don't want to do that before asking you this question. For that viewer watching us tonight who says and compares and looks at the kind of pandemics that or epidemics that we have in the country. We have the HIV scourge, we have TB, we have malaria in some parts of the country, and they're saying we've been able to live with this. Cancer today is one of the biggest killers, and they're saying we've been able to live with this particular diseases. Why is it, or what is so special with COVID-19? While we are sleeping hungry, we are not able to go ahead with our businesses, we've been laid off at our workplaces. What sort of message are you sending from a virological point of view on how we should handle COVID-19? Let's say tomorrow the president addresses the nation, insinuating what he mentioned the other time, that we cannot live with these lockdowns and these restrictions of movement. And he says the country is fully open, go back to your businesses. What should we be doing?
It will be terrible for the president to come up with such a directive at this point in time, mm-hmm, when we actually seeing these numbers beginning to increase. Mm-hmm. What I'd also like to tell Kenyans and the viewers is that HIV, TB, cancer, malaria are very different infections. Mm. Every infection comes with its own burden. Every infection comes with its own mode of transmission. Every infection comes with its own problems and ways to deal with it. Mm. So as much as we might want to compare, you can stand next to an HIV-infected person. You're not going to get infected. But if you stand next to a COVID-infected person without a mask and proper protective gear, you are likely to get infected. Mm-hmm. Also, our healthcare front workers are extremely exposed because of the contagious nature of this infection. Mm-hmm. You don't want to overwhelm the healthcare system. So I think everything must be seen in context. Comparisons can be made, but you must compare with proper information. So all these are very different diseases. So we must look at them from that point of view. I don't like quoting others, but you should just look at countries like Spain, countries like Italy, and ask yourself, what has been the excess mortality in those countries? And number two, how many healthcare workers passed away because of COVID?
Right.
So those are the aspects that we want to take care of. And then the other aspect that is also very scary is that there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of panic, and there's a lot of stigma.
Yeah.
These are things that we really need to deal with as we go ahead. So let's not compare diseases. Diseases come with very different scenarios and very hard sometimes science to completely understand.
Right.
So everything must be seen in its own context.
Everything must be seen in its own context. Thank you so much, Prof, for the insights. But in just 30 seconds, do you foresee a scenario where we'll wake up and the health CS, Mutahi Kagwe, will stand there and address the nation and say, today we are announcing that we have 0 infections of COVID-19. Do you see this happening?
Well, from my own understanding of infectious diseases, it's a yes and a no, because it depends on how this is a new virus. It depends on how it will mutate within the humans and whether it will end up becoming endemic or not. So it's hard to tell now whether really our minister will stand up that day. But I know that in not so long a future, for sure we are going to get a vaccine. And once we get a vaccine, then that will be the best case scenario, because we shall be able to say that on this day we have conquered COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2.
Right. Thank you so much, Prof. Asante sana for making time to speak to us on Africa 411. That is Professor Omu Anzala. He is actually the chief virologist at the Kavi Institute of Clinical Research at the University of Nairobi. That conversation takes us to a fast, short break, but don't go too far, because this is what we have for you still ahead. Uganda's most influential clergy, Pastor Martin Semper, is actually going to be weighing in on the reopening of economies, including churches, in his country. Welcome back. Thank you so much for choosing Africa 411 right here on TV 47. My name, as always, is Eugene at Nangwe. Let's carry on with this broadcast now. Kenya's small and medium businesses need urgent help to survive the economic slowdown caused by the novel coronavirus, and many are at risk of shutting down by the end of June. This is according to Central Bank Governor Patrick Njoroge. Lide Gashomo has the details.
A Central Bank of Kenya survey shows that 75% of small and medium-sized entrepreneurs polled do not have funds to last their businesses for another 60 days.
The survey that was done at the end of April, and that survey indicated that three quarters of SMEs, of the surveyed SMEs, do not have cash beyond 2 months. So that means by end June, these three quarters of SMEs would be, they're on the ropes. They'll be gone.
CBK Governor Patrick Njoroge says that most small entrepreneurs not only require funding, but also markets where they can sell their products.
It's not just financing. The SME situation is not just an issue of throwing money at SMEs. It's also an issue, it is finance plus. It's an issue of also providing them with appropriate solutions for their problems.
The governor also observed that as most banks continue to operate, especially those in areas affected by the cessation of movement, it remains a signal of a resilient economy.
As a matter of fact, a good example is when there was this sort of lockdown in Eastleigh here in Nairobi, and also Old Town in Mombasa. Banks continue to operate, particularly here in Eastleigh. There are 9 bank branches, and they have continued to operate even in the context of the lockdown.
On the other hand, the horticultural sector has been operating well. At least 63% of horticultural products have been exported by mid-May. This beats the percentage of the same products exported in the month of May, the year 2019.
You can already see that these numbers show that there is sort of a return to normalcy in particular, sectors. And I think horticultural exports is one such sector.
Patrick Njoroge says compared to other countries globally, the Kenyan GDP remains positive, a clear indication that the economy remains resilient. The governor says that the reason behind this is that Kenya does not depend on one sector.
Now, it's true we do have some large exports, tea, flowers and other things like that, but we do have highly diversified exports and also destinations.
This comes at a time when the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Kenya retained the base lending rate at 7%. Lide Gashomo, TV 47.
Right. Now, tonight, Malindi Member of Parliament Aisha Jumwa and her Kiminini counterpart Chris Wamalwa are the latest to face the NASA axe after they were de-whipped from parliamentary committees. The NASA house cleaning comes at a time when the ruling Jubilee Party is also on a purge to punish members whose loyalty has been questioned. Elizabeth Mutuku tells us more.
The political house cleaning continues, with the NASA excess falling on members whose loyalty to the coalition has come under sharp focus. Minority Leader in the National Assembly, John Mbadi, says the decision to de-whip Aisha Jumwa and Chris Wamalwa was agreed in the coalition parliamentary group meeting that was attended by over 150 parliamentarians from the parties that form the coalition.
To de-whip, to give the whip the authority and the mandate to formally recall some of our members from the committees. And some 9 members have actually been de-whipped. And de-whipping, I know Kenyans are not used to this, to the meaning of de-whipping. If a member is de-whipped by a party, he is completely de-whipped, meaning he is removed from all committees, which is sitting in courtesy of the party.
The de-whipped members will cease to represent the coalition as leaders of any House committee till the coalition decides otherwise.
Honorable Christantus Wahungu Wamalwa, MP Kiminini, to be removed as the Deputy Minority Whip in the National Assembly and to be replaced by Honorable David Iseli Simiyu, MP Tongare. 2, we have resolved to remove Honorable Aisha Katana Jumwa, MP Malindi, as a representative of the NASA/ODM in the Parliamentary Service Commission and to be replaced by Honorable Mboko Mishi Khamis, MP Likoni.
Others who faced the edge of the NASA coalition's ex include Mugirango South MP Silvana Sosoro, Butere Lomeka Tindimwale, Jomfu MP Badi Twalib, and Kaloleni's Paul Katana, amongst others.
Honorable Katana Paul Kahindi, the MP for Kaloleni, has been de-whipped from the Public Investment Committee. Honorable Badi Twalib, the MP for Jomvu, has also been de-whipped from the Budget and Appropriation Committee. So these members have been de-whipped completely. They will not sit in any committee. They have to go through disciplinary action if they are to come back.
Some of the ex-lawmakers say they have no problem with coalition's decision.
Butere voted for me without committees. I was born, I came out of my mother's womb without any committee. And therefore ODM should keep their committee, give it to their busy bodies. I'm no longer interested in any committee.
Nataka kueleza labda makosa yangu yalikuwa kumwita Mheshimiwa Rais katika sehemu yangu ya Jomvu Miritini, akaniwezesha kunipatia madarasa 4 wakati tulipokuwa na 100% transition na tukiwa hatuna allocation.
Already the NASA coalition, through its leadership, having announced its changes in various committees in the National Assembly. Now it's a matter of do or die for the de-whipped members to see whether they fight for their positions or not. Elizabeth Mutuku, TV47, Parliament Buildings, Nairobi.
Now, away from the politics, this week, global attention has been shifted to the happenings in the United States of America, in the city of Minneapolis, where an unarmed black man died in police custody. George Floyd, 46, died on Monday, and a video showed him grasping for breath as a white policeman knelt on his neck. Now, back here in Africa, Global Competitiveness Report. Can an African country offer lessons to the world's superpower on police citizens management? Let's now cross over live to Rwanda's capital, Kigali, to speak to Commissioner of Police John Bosco Kabera, who's the Rwanda National Police spokesperson. CP Kabera, thank you so much for joining us right here on Africa 411. The world is actually now talking about this brutality that we've seen in the United States, and we know that a lot is being said about the police and their actions when handling citizens. How is it that Rwanda is ranked as the most reliable as far as the police is concerned? What's the secret?
Thank you very much for having me. I think this is a very difficult question because it is a question that deals with winning hearts and minds of people. But I think overall it has been built for over 20 years. The police has been in existence. First, our policing philosophy has been built on creating partnerships and winning trust of the citizenry. We created a form of partnership with the government, administrative entities, government, and the other private institutions. Secondly, we have, for example, over 174,000 members of community policing committees and 3,000 youth volunteers across the country. These do not only help us during anti-crime campaigns, but they also help us in giving us information with regard to crime prevention and the crime solving. So this is very, very key in as far as our policing philosophy is concerned. We have also been able to engage, be engaged in human activity, human security activities to support the less privileged, such as providing medical insurance, constructing houses, donating cows to the needy, giving power to off-grid communities. And this happens in June every year when we are celebrating the establishment of one national police. So this is also very, very key to working with the citizenry and the communities. Fourth, and the most important one, is the establishment of joint operation centers across the country on national level and district level up to sector level. This has been done under the guidance of His Excellency the President and Commander-in-Chief. And these joint operation centers, different levels, are attended by security forces and other government officials at the district level, like mayors, where we sit and deliberate about the security situation, security challenges, and other issues. So this helps us to deal with the issues as they emerge and be able to engage the citizenry at the lowest level.
I know those who are watching
think this has in part played a very important role.
Yeah, I know those who are watching us right now, they've heard you talk about every June. There are those who actually, citizens who are expecting cows from the police, who are expecting medical insurance to be paid for them by the police. There are those who are expecting houses to be constructed for them by the police. How possible is this? I mean, there are those who are wondering, just like I am right now.
No, I have told you we've established strong partnerships with the local government entities. We've established partnerships with the private institutions. And this is possible because working together you can achieve more. This cannot obviously be achieved by police alone, much as the ranking says. This cannot be achieved by the police alone. So you have to establish partnerships. You have to have these youth volunteers who can contribute towards doing some of these activities, even for no pay. As their name clearly indicates, they are youth volunteers, so they volunteer quite a lot. Then these community policing committees, they work with the police every day. So we think partnerships have been very, very important, and that's why we find ourselves really working with every institution and every level of the citizenry. So we take this very, very, very serious.
Right. Before I let you go, there are those who say it is African for us to always be hard-headed and tough-headed, and so for someone to instill discipline in us, there is a level of beating that we deserve. And we saw this across various countries when it comes to implementation of curfew rules, where police had to brutally chase citizens around to be able to ensure that they are not crowded in places and they are also home on time before curfew time begins. How different was it, or has it been for you in Rwanda, even now as you plan to reinforce or actually enforce the reopening measures of the economy amid COVID-19?
Thank you very much. We've got quite a very, very revealing experience with regard to policing during this pandemic. We spent over 2 months. We started with the lockdown. Thereafter, some sectors of the economy were reopened, and with effect from 1st June, I think largely the economy will be reopened. So, but first of all, you have to work with the oral entities. We have to work with the government, for example, the Ministry of Health, the local government, and the other agencies to be able to have a plan and a strategy on how, first of all, you are going to educate the population. Secondly, you have to have a media campaign and a media strategy. How do you continually engage the citizenry? What are they supposed to do, and how are they supposed to behave? And how do you explain the measures that are put forward or put in place by the government? And how do you engage people using different platforms? For example, social media have been very, very helpful. How people have been trying to sensitize their colleagues, especially during the lockdown period, commonly known as Gmamurugo for our case. And then police officers are deployed along the road to be able to enforce the measures. But the most important aspect during enforcement is to be able to listen, to the population. Whoever goes out of his home or her home has to have a reason. And therefore, police had to take time, listen, and advise accordingly. When you find the case is not genuine, definitely you will try to sensitize and educate someone and then return him home. So I think the last 2 months have given us experience, and going forward with the motors that are going into the roads in next week, we are better prepared. And for their case, we've been working with the Rwanda Utility Regulatory Agency, RURA. There are cooperatives across the country. There are over 200 cooperatives. And we've been having meetings at a national level, district level, where we've got different policy units working with their cooperative heads, the RURA and the other agencies, so that we prepare ourselves. Yesterday, the Rwanda Utility Regulatory Agency issued a statement on how this is going to be conducted.
Right.
The motorists know their requirements, their passengers know what to expect and what they should have. So we've been trying to get prepared very early, within a week before they go into the road. So we hope everything will go on well.
Right.
And if something comes up, definitely we work, we coordinate, and see how to overcome any challenge that comes up. So it is a learning process, yes. This is the first time we've had this situation in Rwanda. From the lockdown, it was the first time. Reopening some part of the economy, the first time. And going forward, I think we are getting experience to be able to handle this situation until we defeat this pandemic.
Right. What's coming out is the importance of multi-sectoral coordination and cooperation in actually achieving all this that you're achieving in Rwanda. But I cannot leave you without asking this question on instilling of discipline in the police officers. Let's take an example of what has happened in the United States of America, where a police officer is filmed doing what we saw in the United States, that what happened to that gentleman who lost his life later on. What would happen if such a thing was to happen in Rwanda, where a police officer is actually caught on tape or reported to have mishandled or manhandled a civilian in Rwanda? What usually are the 5 key steps that are taken to deal with such a police officer?
Eugene, I think every police institution has got its own statute and code of conduct that must be adhered to religiously, let me say that. So for our case, it is not acceptable, and if any police officer tries to brutalize a civilian, he or she is going to be dealt with severely. And fortunately, we try to sensitize our officers to behave well, but we have got a severe code of conduct that clearly every police officer knows in one national police. So there are limits, and there are unacceptable behavior and conduct, which we think must be emphasized for the police force to be disciplined. So as far as I'm concerned, I think I can speak on behalf of one national police, and that's all we can do when such things happen.
Right. Commissioner of Police John Bosco Kabera, thank you so much for making time to speak to us all the way in Kigali, Rwanda. Thank you very much. He is the Rwanda National Police spokesperson, speaking to us on the lessons that we can pick from a country that was ranked as the most reliable police unit. And of course, this takes us to the next story, and which brings us to Uganda, where COVID-19 pandemic measures are definitely making life worse in some parts of the economies, and most vulnerable people are being devastated in one way or another, and there are the huge number of people who are affected. Now, so many countries are considering opening up their economies, and they are gradually easing restrictions on movement. Uganda is amongst the latest of the countries to announce actions putting an ease to their lockdown measures. Let's take a look at this story by Linda Alela.
As if taking cue from fellow African countries, Uganda is set to ease its strict lockdown from June the 2nd, in part by reopening schools for learners set to do national examinations this year. In a televised address from the capital, Kampala, on the May of 19th, President Yoweri Museveni said the country had in a way managed to control COVID-19 spread, reporting no single death. The country has so far been on 54 days of restrictions, and Museveni says they are now better equipped to trace and detect the infections faster, hence the need to gradually regain normalcy.
4th of June, that is now for the public transport. The education institutions, again, they will use these 2 weeks to prepare, and by the 4th of June, they will tell you, they will put out their action plan, how things will move.
The East African nation joins others on the continent in easing restrictions that were introduced to curb the spread of the coronavirus before and after some recorded fast cases. The measures in most of the countries have brought economies to their knees, raising the risk of hunger and social distress.
Wakati umefika na nimeambia mawaziri wetu na haswa maofisa wetu wa afya waanze kuambia Wakenya, waanze kuwaeleza Wakenya ya kwamba hatuwezi kuendelea na lockdown, hatuwezi kuendelea maisha na curfew.
Citizens in the various countries have mixed reactions on the reopening though, some in support while others decry lack of readiness.
Ikiwa serikali imepata mkopo kutoka kwa IMF ama World Bank, hiyo mkopo iweze kuwa distributed kwa hawa Kenya na waweze kutusaidia.
It hasn't made that much effect simply because most of our people use public means plus private means. So it won't be easy for them to access our service.
In time of coming to work, you find that you come from very far and sometimes you foot or you ride. Now, if it is footing, you find that you come late.
Some of the countries that have started the ease include Ghana, that says its virus lockdown became untenable for economy. South Africa further eased rules as churches and other places of worship are set to reopen from June. Tanzania eased the few restrictions that were put. Nigeria began easing restrictions early May in its capital Abuja and in its largest city Lagos. As of Wednesday, Uganda had 281 confirmed COVID-19 cases and no death. The World Health Organization, the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the World Economic Forum issued guidelines for African countries looking to reopen their economies after weeks of lockdown due to the coronavirus. Health authorities, however, are concerned that opening up too quickly could trigger a fresh wave of COVID-19 cases on the continent. Linda Alela for Africa 411.
Thank you very much, Linda, for that particular report. Now, earlier on, I spoke to Pastor Martin Semper. Martin Semper is actually considered Uganda's most influential clergy, and I started by asking him for his analysis on the effectiveness of the lockdown that was actually imposed in Uganda and its effects in rolling back the COVID-19 infections in that country.
Yeah, coronavirus spreads in people interactions, and the more there is frequent interactions, the more is the spread of the coronavirus. So it's case, then it becomes a cluster, and then before you know it, boom, it becomes a pandemic. So the lockdown that has been the last few weeks that the president put into place, I thought was great. I thought that it was a hard choice. I know my country and my leaders, they really put a lot of emphasis on the economy. They think investors are like small goats that came from planet Mars, and they do a lot of effort to try to make the life of investors happy, sometimes at the expense of locals. So I really was worried that since they really put a lot of value on the economy, they would not make the necessary sacrifice of delaying or closing down airports, buses, restricting school movements. But they did. I think Museveni did a good job on that one. So it has really delayed the spread of the infection here. It's now being released a bit, and I'm sort of holding my breath, wondering what's going to happen next.
Right. Pastor, you are among people who actually, rely on what we call feeding of, the congregations with the Word of God. And we know that we've had several pastors who've also had mixed reactions, some of them calling on their governments to reopen churches. We've seen presidents such as President Magufuli, who's urged his people to continue going to church and to use, the churches as centers of, fighting this particular virus, which is termed as the devil. For you, are you among the team of people or team of pastors who are happy that churches could soon be fully reopened?
If they do, I will not be happy about it. I don't think it's right. I am personally very aware that church happens in the large meetings, and also church happens in small meetings. I do have a big church, and I have bills to pay. I have bank loans that I need to be able to service when people come together. But I also care very much about the lives of people. And I know that church doesn't stop when we don't meet as a large group. It continues. During Idi Amin's time, we had church going underground in community groups. So to say that church has stopped is not really technically true. It's as far as large meetings are concerned. I think that President Magufuli is a very good man. I have tremendous respect for him. I also have a lot of love for him as he stands for morality in the country and on the continent. However, I think on this issue, as far as releasing the church and thinking that if we don't have large meetings, we will not pray, I think that was wrong. I have seen in South Korea where large meetings have spread the infection. We have seen in Iran during the religious meetings, the infection spread. We've also seen in other places in the United States where the infection spread because of the meetings of people. So it is an unfortunate thing to bring a conflict between faith and public health. I've done a speech, and I'm working on a paper where I am examining how the Bible gives guidance of quarantining in terms of dealing with infectious diseases. So I'm working on this to send it to Magufuli and to other ministers in Nigeria, across Africa, across the world, so that we do not have an unnecessary conflict, protecting people and being faithful to God.
Right. There are those who actually argue now, and possibly so that coronavirus is here to stay with us. There have been word that the World Health Organization could have already lowered the risk of COVID-19 in the sense of the, moving it from what they call a pandemic to an epidemic, saying that, this thing is going to be here with us just like other diseases, and so we need to start learning to live with it. From where you sit right now, how do you see worship being transformed as a result of COVID-19? What is the future of worship, if you may?
I think that we have to re-energize worship to start in the individual, worship to continue in the family, and maybe a few families coming together. I think that's where we need to look. For now, it's just the fact that we are in that, that's how it is. The world has changed. I think trying to insist that we must have these large meetings, I think that's wrong. We must find a way to survive. So we're going to have concerts that are online for large groups of meeting. We're going to have preaching that's spread out. There is need to harness technology. Zoom is becoming a new thing. Crusades of the past, where we have where the Benny Hinn type large crusades, I think that's a thing of the past right now. Personally, I think we are going to be together with COVID unless God does a miracle, for at least a year before a vaccine comes out. And if that's it, then we better prepare for about 1 year to 2 years of disruption from the normal to the abnormal to where we are. So the preaching is going to be using technologies of Zoom or Facebook. I know it's difficult for many of us who are from the old school. However, it is forcing us to do that. I'm calling my pastor friends to see how we can be able to work that. So, I personally think that meetings, I discourage large meetings for now. And I know my pastor friends may not be happy with me, but I need you to know I'm educated. I have a PhD that was given to me by my master's graduate school for my work in HIV/AIDS. I've been working in HIV prevention for 30 years. I gave most of my life to do that. I'm also in Uganda on the National Task Force against coronavirus. I thought that I needed to get to the place where decisions are being made. I'm also making it my personal business to speak to my fellow pastors so that they do not have the unnecessary conflict. So it is changing. The world is different. We've moved from digital, from analog to digital. Some of us may be holding the old analog radio, trying to get sound out of it, or television, trying to get an analog signal. It's not there. It's changed. It's different.
Right.
So that's what I think.
That's what you think. Pastor, before I let you go, there are those pastors who feel and say that, at first they felt that maybe going digital would work, putting their services online would work, but today they feel they're not really feeling it. Being alone in that particular hall, preaching to people you cannot feel, you cannot see, you cannot lay your hands over their heads and their shoulders as you pray for them. They are saying, no, we want to be able to have these congregations brought in front of us and with us. What message are you telling them tonight?
My brothers and sisters, I just want to let you know that we have to teach God's people, but we must protect their lives. And I've seen many good people who have defied good sound advice. First of all, quarantining is in the Bible. Leviticus chapter 13, chapter 14, chapter 15. God says if you examine someone and if they appear like they may have something suspect, let them be put away for 7 days. And if you examine again for 7 days, and another time 7 days, and those who have been infected must be separated from the infected. If, this particular virus cannot be seen, and the best way we can do is to keep groups of people from coming together. Yet the gospel must be preached. So we must be innovative. We must find ways of using and harnessing this media to get to them. We must find a way of working small groups. China has shown us. In Uganda, during the 70s, during Idi Amin's time, we had tremendous challenges, and we had to go underground. We had to have church meetings. So this is where we are. This is where we are, where we have to have meetings that are underground, that are smaller, to protect the lives of people. And as we teach God's people, encourage them that praying is not when the guitarist plays. Praying and worship is when we decide in our hearts to give our lives to the Lord and worship Him and serve Him, even in our homes. So it is tough, but it's going to be a change, both a paradigm shift, because we are so used to the big meetings. We Africans, we get together for everything. We have big baptismal meetings. Everybody comes together. As the famous anthropologist have spoken to us in terms of who we are as Africans. We do everything together. We have funerals together, we baptize together, we do weddings together. You don't even send us an invitation, we just show up. But for this time, because of coronavirus, we have to make sure that we reduce the amount of people coming together while we share the love and celebration of Christ.
Right. Right, that was a conversation with Pastor Martin Semper, and he's from Uganda, sharing his thoughts on the plans to reopen the Ugandan economy, including churches. Now, finally, police and protesters have clashed for a second night in the U.S. city of Minneapolis after an unarmed black man died in police custody. George Floyd, 46, died on Monday, and a video showed him gasping. Irakoze, who's a Burundian based in the city of Maine in the United States of America, on the state of affairs from her perspective as a young African living there. I started by seeking her views on the latest happenings in her own country, Burundi, which has just come out of a presidential election.
I think what happened in Burundi recently was just a shock for many, because many Burundians believed that after 15 years, the party in power would hand the country to Gwasa, who was so loved by the people. And just like they did 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and even 5 years ago, they stole the elections. And it's sad because when you go back to the history of the Burundi as a country, is a country where whenever there is democratic elections, it's not the voice of the people that gets to rule, besides when Sendede was voted, and that was in 2005. So the elections were just a formality because we knew that the party in power is not ready to leave. And we knew they were going to do anything possible to keep the power. So I think the struggle continues. We hope that maybe in the next elections, they will be willingly to share. And we hope that Burundi will get to have a president that cares about the country.
Right. We know very well that the Catholic Church in Burundi, is said to have a very strong opinion and a strong voice when it comes to what they say. And already they have mentioned that there are some discrepancies in this election in Burundi. Where do you see this ending? Are you seeing this as something that will just, fall on deaf ears and status quo will remain?
Yes. One, because Burundians are tired. So we have been a country that didn't get to know any form of peace for long. So Burundians are tired. So that's enough for them to accept any kind of sort of that comes to them. So they are tired. So I don't think they are ready to demand that the government be held accountable on what happened during the elections, because there was a time over a day or two when social media wasn't working. And then there are news here and there, even the Catholic Church mentioned about it, that they were unable to confirm the number of people who voted because the people from the party were missing with the elections. But because Burundians are tired, I don't think they are ready to hold the government accountable. So the status quo is going to continue. But what gives me hope is that even in the middle of all that, the people who really wanted change, the people who voted for Gwasa, and Gwasa represented change for them, he is still the status quo for them because he has been, a rebel. He has killed a lot of people. He has done so many wrong things, but he represented another future for the country. So the people who voted for him give me hope because they are not ready to be silenced. But I don't think it would change a lot because people are just tired and their tiredness is just whatever is handed to us, we're going to take it as it is. We just want to leave.
Right. Let's now move a bit and talk about life in the United States, a country or actually a place where COVID-19 is hitting really hard as we speak today when it comes to new cases of infection. How is it like being there in the center of all this?
Oh, wow. So I've been here for quite long enough, that, and I think this pandemic has just made me realize how messed up this country is. So we are in the middle of a virus that has hit the economy of the country, that has kept all of us inside. It used to take me 5 minutes to do grocery shopping. Now it takes me 4 hours because we have to be in lines. But in the middle of all that, Americans just want to be outside. And it's funny because the idea of that we should stay in our homes to be safe doesn't resonate with most of them. So they are outside in the middle of a pandemic trying to keep up with the normal that they thought they had. And I don't know if that's what makes them Americans, to ignore the reality of the system they live in, but it confuses me as a Burundian who have lived through different type of trauma. Staying in my home is something I'm used to, but seeing them protest on being outside doesn't really inspire me in anything. It just confuses me again on how this country is messed up.
Right. It's very interesting that you say that in your own words, messed up, because we have seen a lot of Africans who have, taken risks or even dying at sea just to be able to go or get into countries like the United States of America. I want to read your thoughts on the state of affairs as they are today. We know of the police brutality videos that we've continued to see, and we know of 55 years ago where Malcolm X himself, who actually talked about police brutality, and I quote, he said that they attack the victim, and then the criminal that attacked the victim accuses this victim for attacking him. And this is what he described as the American democracy. As you sit there as an African yourself, what runs through your mind when you think of those Africans who want to rush to countries like the United States and call that in the chase of the American dream and greener pastures?
Oh, wow. I think before I came to this country, I would have loved to understand the systemic and the systems that run this country. Because when I moved here and racism, white supremacy slapped into my face, I was confused. And as you said, the reality that Malcolm X mentioned 55 years ago are still valid today. And they are valid because the United States of America is a country built on white supremacy, is a country built on anti-blackness. So is a country built on whiteness, is a country built on many wrong narratives around Black people. So our own very existence in this country doesn't matter at all. We are the criminals, we are the least raised, and our existence doesn't matter. And when you hear about it as an outsider, when you are outside of this country, you think it's a tale, you think it's not a reality. But you see it every single day in systems, at hospitals, in school. In many ways, our life as Black people in this country don't really matter at all. So when we talk about American democracy, it's a myth to me. And the American dream is also a myth to me, because the people who can really catch the American dream in this country are people who are white or white passing. A person who is Black has the less chances to make it in this country because, first of all, you're going to arrive in the middle of institutionalized racism, and then your Blackness will not allow you to strive at the same level white people are striving. And that is the reality. You will have to work twice hard to be considered as you matter, as qualified as a white person. Then comes that when you come as an immigrant and you are Black, you are just a second citizen. And that is the reality. And the jobs that second citizens do here, we know them. Most of them don't get to make it and do the jobs that are qualified what they started. You ended up doing the very minimum wage jobs so you can be able to pay your bills. And that is the system that runs in this country. So yeah, Africans, we have the desire to go abroad and make it out there, but I want all of us to realize the conditions that we live in. You are African, you are Black, and white supremacy will catch up with you in these superpowers countries that you want to immigrate into.
Right. Would you say that we are actually, as Africans or those who are, sought immigration, status in countries like the United States of America, are the ones to blame for this because of how much they have been able to shower countries or Western nations with praises, and as far as supremacy is concerned, where do you point the finger of blame, if I may?
I turn the thing of blame again to white supremacy. And we have to understand this as a system. It's a system of power. And you know what, Eugene, when we talk about white supremacy and we mention our past like slavery, colonialism, people tell us that it's outdated. But it's not, because what we live today is rooted in slavery and racism and colonialism. To understand the United States of America and the system that runs into the country today, you have to understand how this country was built. This country was built by white settlers who were bringing slaves from Africa. And those slaves who came here came without an identity. Then when they were liberated, this country was built on imperialism and anti-blackness. So they didn't get any other freedom because slavery ended and evolved into something else. So the blame is onto this system that runs this world, a system that will portray America as the land of the free, as the land of the living, as the paradise that everyone should dream to live in, and will hide our everyday reality here, that we are afraid to watch the birds outside, we are afraid to drive outside, we are afraid that you're just gonna meet a white police officer who is scared of Black people, and you will just sneeze and he will shoot you and you'll be dead. And the only reason he will give just you were black, so you threaten him. The very simple reason that you are black. And that is what white supremacy has done to our existence. It has put us in a space where we are the villains that we don't deserve to live. So it's a system, and the blame has to be put on the system, and also the powers that sustain the system. I think look at the president we have in this country, Trump. He gets to stand up in front of people on TV and be a white supremacist and endorse racism, endorse misogyny without no consequences at all. And that gives power to the systems in power, because it emphasizes that if the president of the United States can stay quiet when the police are shooting black people, what does it say of the simple American who own a gun, and one day he will see me coming from maybe at my job and trying to enter my house, and he would think I'm trying to steal him, or I'm trying to attack him, and I'll be dead.
And nothing will be done.
The only excuses he would say is that she was a black woman.
Right.
She was an angry black woman, and that would be it.
Judy,
so the blame has to be these systems that we live in.
Right. There have been measures that have been taken by several groups of people. We understand the fact that there has been a movement called Black Lives Matter movement, which was formed in 2013. And it has sort of been very active as far as pushing against police brutality in the U.S. And they've been organizing die-ins, marches, and demonstrations in response to the killings of black men and women by the police. But do you see this as being enough? I mean, what would be enough beyond just blaming the white supremacy and these movements and demonstrations? What would be enough, in your opinion?
I mean, you just said what would be enough beyond blaming the white supremacy, and I found that problematic. I think what would be enough is that we have to abolish white supremacy, and abolishing white supremacy requires that we question the very core of power that the United States stand on. The very core of power that many of European countries stand on, and that requires that we hold them accountable. So the only way to stop police brutality in this country is to abolish white supremacy, is to abolish the context, the construct of whiteness. And what's most sad in this country is that racism, it's so institutionalized. It's in institutions. You understand? It's who gets to go to school, who gets to be in prison. It's who access this and that, and that is at the core of what whiteness has become. So for me, our organizing has to stand on a firm position that what we want isn't just the police to stop killing us. What we want is to abolish white supremacy, is to abolish all the narratives that anti-blackness stand on. And in this country, it's going to be very, very, very hard. And I'm going to be honest. I sometimes lose hope for America. And I said I've been here quite long enough to know that I lose hope, because racism is just at the core of this country. It's as if you say you have to abolish the whole country and build a new country. Because the United States, as it is now, it's funded on racism. So I don't know how this country can exist without racism. And that is another reality that people have to imagine. But as the country is now, it's funded, it thrives on racism.
Judy, there are those who actually also would argue and say that, as blacks, we, especially coming from Africa, we have sort of given legitimacy to, the democracy in these Western nations. When it comes to our elections, you'll see most opposition leaders, or even those who are observing these elections, they would take what the Western observers say as a rubber stamp to actually affirm whether the elections were democratic or not. Human rights violations, we've seen fingers pointed at African countries countries for violating human rights, but we've seen none of the African countries pointing a finger at the United States when it comes to such kind of issues that are going on right now. What comes to your mind when you weigh this kind of happenings across the weighing scale?
You know what Thomas Sankara said when he was protesting against France Afrique Summit? He said that he who feeds you owns you. Mm-hmm. So the power dynamics between African countries and Western powers is rooted that African countries depend on Western powers. Mm-hmm. So we get loans, we get NGO aid. So, I mean, it's the power dynamics. They feed us in a way or another, and we have allowed it. So they have the right to detect what's democracy, mm-hmm. even when we know they are not well. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't be telling us what democracy should look like. We still listen, because at the end of the day, what feeds you owns you. Mm-hmm. So the question should be on my generation, the African generation that sees all those kind of things. Mm-hmm. How do we decolonize ourselves? How do we liberate our country? Mm-hmm. How do we abolish these power dynamics? How do we refuse that we get to be told how to be Africans, how to run our countries, how to run our elections? How do we set the terms of our own existence? And you have to remember that this is a journey. It's not going to be a one-day event. Mm-hmm. This is a journey that Nkrumah Kwame was on, that Nelson Mandela was on, that Thomas Sankara was on, and they died for it. Mm-hmm. So we have to remember that it's going to be a very, very, very challenging journey, because these powers strive on Africa. And that is a reality. And we shouldn't even fear to talk about it. They strive on Africa. They strive on controlling Africa. That's how their power streams from. So if we dare to question that, if we dare to demand that we'll be treated equally, we have to also be ready to navigate the resources they are handling to us. So how should that look like? I mean, this brings us to my generation, the ones who are part of political decisions, the ones who are part of political spaces. We have to start thinking on how the relationship between Africa and the rest of the world will look like when we don't need Chinese labor, when we don't need the US funds, when we don't need UN money, when we don't need all these loans and money that we do ask to survive as a continent. How will the relationships look like? Right. Because for now, they look the way they look because we depend on them.
Right. But Judy, you and I understand that the average age of our African leaders today, if I'm not wrong, is about 60 years. And of course, a majority of leaders in Africa are mostly the ones who are sitting on these tables of negotiation for us. And so when you say that our generation today, I mean, do you see this even happening, considering the fact that very few African leaders are within your generation and my generation?
That's a very good question. You know, something I've learned, Adrian, is that leadership takes many other forms. And you see what we are doing right now, me and you, it's a type of leadership. And I want to dare Africans, my generation, to take up leadership. I mean, you're not going to wake up tomorrow and run your country, but you can wake up tomorrow and start a book study in your community where you talked about Pan-Africanism and what it means to care about the African continent. You can start a book study. You can start a community initiative where you take care of the land that your ancestors left you. We need to start organizing. But of course, we also need to start questioning. And it's sad because sometimes we confuse patriotism and not questioning the state. Patriotism involves that we also question the state and also question the reality of African continent. I mean, we can blame the West as we want, but some of our other issues are really rooted on our bad leadership that we have. Because you cannot expect a president who can be in power for 32 years, a president who can be in power for 28 years. You cannot explain how African states have become family businesses. The father, the son, the son, the son, the son, and the son. Just a generation of family businesses that runs the country. We have to refuse to be comfortable. And I know when you are oppressed, you get to be comfortable, especially in our African, ways of living, but let's not be distracted as Africans. And also my generation, please, let's not be comfortable. Dare to take up space, dare to question. At the end of the day, we have to get to a point where we live free or die, Eugene. Yeah. And just like our revolutionaries did, but we have to question that. And I dare, again, I emphasize on my daring to tell my African brothers and sisters that are my generations to take up space. It's our responsibility. We owe it to ourselves. We deserve a better Africa. So let's build the better Africa.
Let's build a better Africa. Judy, before I let you go, I'll just take you back to what probably analysts argue and say takes away the moral authority from Africans to question some of the things that are happening even now in the Western nations. They would argue and say, look at yourselves. You have not been able to be united in your own way. We've seen South Africa. We had cases of xenophobia attacks where Africans stand against fellow Africans. Even when we talk about the police brutality issue, we have seen videos of police brutalizing citizens. Even here in Kenya, for example, we've seen such kind of videos and images of how people have been brutalized. So when we look at these happenings, how hard or how easy does it make it for us to question what is happening even in the Western nations like in the US right now?
The idea that to question someone else, your own life has to be perfect, is a lie, because life is messy. That's one. But two, we were raised to never question the US because the US has always been messy, but they control the type of messiness that we have to see. And just because yesterday a video of a police killing a black man went out doesn't mean it started yesterday. It has been going on even in the era where no recordings were happening. Yeah. So it's just that now people are so using any resources they have to raise awareness. So yeah, we should question what's happening in the West, but we also have to look at the fire burning in our own houses. And when we talk about xenophobia, for example, this is a conversation that sometimes we escape, but xenophobia brings us back to the borders that were imposed on us and what white people made us understand about nationalism and what it means to be African. You should understand that before they found us, we were not existing according to the borders that they were imposed on us. Kingdoms had their own way of living, of course messy, but the way we view nationalism today is rooted in borders that a white man in Berlin, in a chateau, thought of imposing on us, and then we sit on that and dare to call a fellow African that doesn't fit in those borders that a white man mapped for you and say they don't belong? How fool can we get to be? And we also have to understand that this power that strive on Africa being weak and needing them, strive on us being, divided. So we also have to be wise, because the very core of racism, the very core of white supremacy is to keep us distracted, to keep us away from the issues that we are facing and keep us in unnecessary fights among us. That's why I tell Africans to focus. Africans, you have to focus and realize that the very core of our existence is that way before a white person found us, they thought we didn't matter. And when they found us, they decided that our lives matter because it was rooted in them validating us. So we have to free ourselves by freeing from our own houses. So let's be honest also when we call out the West and mention the fire burning in our own houses. But police brutality, as I was talking, Eugene, in Burundi, for example, in my country, the police hunt young people all the time. You dare to question the state, they hunt on you. That's what I was talking. Let's not always blame the West. We also have our leaders invested in their own power. So we have to be honest on all type of chains that are on our necks as Africans, and dare to question them.
Right, Judy, I want to let you go, but I feel like we need this conversation to go on and on. But I have to let you go for now. I'm sure that we'll have another conversation, especially on decolonizing our mindsets and many other things. But then it's very interesting that if these things that are happening in the States were happening in a certain African country, I'm sure those organizations that advocate for human rights would have probably made some noise. But it's very interesting. There are people who are arguing and saying, why is it that an organization like Human Rights Watch, for instance, right now has not made any statements concerning such kind of things? I don't know what your quick take would be on this as we wrap it up.
I mean, an organization like Human Rights Watch is rooted in showcasing Africa as the villain, part of the world. So they won't care what's happening in the West because their agenda is to focus on how Africa is the last place any human being should be on, and to showcase on how horrible it is to be in Africa. And it's funny because you will see why people traveling to Africa and trying to tell you how they're scared, that you're not going to survive a day. And you're like, my sister, you live in the States. Why aren't you scared of how unstable your country is? So again and again, it's just because these powers are rooted in an African narrative that doesn't sustain the autonomy and the well-being of Africans. It's an African narrative that shows that Africa always will need to be saved. And the question is, who do we need to be saved from?
Quite a thought-provoking conversation right there with Judy Kaeli-Rakoze. She is Burundian, but living in the United States of America, just trying to give us her own perspective of the whole white supremacy issue and many other continental issues. And I will be looking forward to reading your thoughts and comments from the conversations that we've had on this show tonight. All you need to do is just keep the conversations going at the hashtag Africa411 on our social media platforms, at TV47KE or at Eugene Anangwe. That's my personal social media handle, and I'll be happy to get in touch with you. If you'd like to be part of this program, also get in touch with us. We'll be able to share with you on how to be on the show. I want to wrap it up from that particular note, but I want to thank all our panelists, Pastor Martin Sempa from Uganda, Judy Kaela in the United States, and of course Prof, who actually gave us perspective on the numbers of COVID-19. But I also want to thank our producers and presenters or reporters who put together the stories that we've had for you right here. Our sound engineers and the entire technical crew, and most importantly, our sign language interpreter, Anne Wairimo. I cannot thank you enough because of the fact that you translate this and interpret this to ensure that it reaches many other people who might not be able to get this if you are not seated right there and doing what you're doing right now. Thank you very much for being a part of Africa 411. We'll talk Africa again next week, same time, same place. My name as always is Eugene Anangwe. Goodbye.